So, welcome to today's training. This is part 3 of our Introduction to Work series, Skills Needed to Work Independently. This is where we start getting into some really practical ideas. So, you will be getting a copy of this slide deck. Feel free, of course, to take notes on anything, but you don't need to write down everything you see on the slides. You will be getting those. I will be asking you to complete an evaluation at the end. I'll drop that link in the chat box toward the end of the presentation, and that gives our funders reason to continue to fund us. So be honest, because I also use these evaluations to help me to improve our trainings, which is very important that we make things relevant and important to you. My name is Sharon Blackman. I'm the Director of Training at Families Helping Families of Greater New Orleans. And ours is one of 9 Families Helping Families centers, and we are all over the state. No matter the parish you live, there is an FHF center that serves your area. Ours is located in Jefferson Parish, and we provide over 100 of these kinds of trainings every year on special education and disability related topics. So be sure to check out our calendar of events and sign up for any of these that you think would be interesting for you. This training project was originally funded through a grant from the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services. That's OSERS is the acronym for that. Also the Rehabilitation Services Administration, or RSA. And it's a project of the Alabama Parent Education Center. The RSA Parent Center region that compiled this project includes our center in Louisiana, as well as partners in Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So it was a large project, and we have developed this 4-part series from the project. So here's a little get to know you question, okay? What is your superpower? Now, notice I didn't ask, what superpower would you like to have? It's not that kind of question. All of us are here today because we relate in some way to the world of disabilities. And there is some place in that world where you shine. So where do you shine? What is your biggest strength? What's your superpower? So drop that in the chat box for me. You must have a superpower somewhere where it comes to the world of disabilities. I think that my superpower, Nicole says advocacy, absolutely. I think that my superpower may be empathy. I don't know, I've got ideas on that. So we have being an advocate for my son. I sometimes get called Mama Bear. Yes, I've been called that and some other things as well. So yes, advocacy. Mama Bear is a superpower. One of these days, all of us need to just make a pact and dress up for Halloween as Mama Bears, because we are that, if nothing else. And then I become Mama Bear for other people's kids, right? I mean, my son's grown now, and I find myself, getting the hairs on the back of my neck stand up sometimes when I hear stories that parents tell, and I become Mama Bear to someone else. So I guess that's where the empathy comes in that I've mentioned earlier. Who else? What is your superpower when it comes to the world of disabilities? What superpower do you wield? And if you can't come up with one now, I want you to keep thinking about this. That is empowering to know where you are strong when it comes to this. And we're all in this together, either as a professional or a self-advocate or a parent. We're all in this together, and each of us has different strengths, and hopefully we're learning to draw on the strengths of others as we go through this journey. That's what Families Helping Families is here for. So let's look at our learning goals. This presentation is going to highlight these key employment skills. Okay, these are the skills we're going to be talking about throughout the presentation. Organization and time management, very important. Self-determination and self-advocacy. Safety, financial management, job seeking and job keeping, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and personal skills. And we'll be looking at each of these kind of broad areas and talking about specific objectives that fall into that category. Some of these areas you might decide would be great IEP goals for your high school student as they work on transition to adulthood. If you choose some of these goal areas, work with your child's teacher and the IEP team to make sure that these goals are SMART. The acronym stands for specific, measurable, action word oriented, realistic, and time bound or timely. In part 4 of this series, we're going to revisit these areas, and we're going to talk about resources for each of these areas that will help you to address the skills with your student or young adult. If you have not already signed up for part 4, let me drop this in the chat box real quick. Okay, the link for part 4 is in the chat box now. That is going to be next Thursday, a week from today, also at 10 a.m. That's part 4 of our series. I also have the other parts recorded. I'm going to be putting those on our website. So if you need to go back and listen to those, if you missed one or both of them and you want to go back and listen, I'm going to have those on our website as well. And if I can get that done before I send out your follow-up email for today, I'll send you the link to those recordings if you need that. Now, the first area we're discussing on the checklist is organization and time management. Youth and young adults with disabilities need to know how to manage their time effectively so that they're on time for work. They can keep up with scheduled events in their lives and in the workplace. Okay, it's just it's a management issue. Skills covered under the area of organization and time management are on your screen. Using a calendar to keep track of school or work or personal activities, using their own calendar. And you know, everybody's got a phone these days, and it's easy to keep up with things using the app on your phone. Telling time. Telling time on a digital clock as well as an analog clock is helpful. Using alarms to get up on time. My younger child started getting up with an alarm clock when she was about 8 or 9. And I was doing that to prepare her for being a teenager and preparing her for adulthood. Using timers for reminders. I do that myself because I can't remember everything. I've got too many plates spinning, you know. So I use timers all the time. Making and following a to-do list. Guilty. Getting to activities and events on time. That's so important. If they can't get to a particular event on time now, that's not going to happen in the workplace. So work on that now. Breaking large tasks into smaller, more manageable steps sometimes is very helpful. Setting long-term goals, like what's your big picture goal? What do you want to be when you grow up? And then create steps to meet those. Having a cell phone with apps for daily use and living. Learning how to use those apps is really, really important. We have the technology now that really can help us stay on task and stay on target. No need not to use them. So teaching youth how to use the technology, the devices, the apps to support skill development in organization and time management is so helpful. And again, in part 4 next week, we're going to talk about resources to help develop these skills. So now let's look at the second skill area, self-determination and self-advocacy. These are critical skills for youth and young adults with disabilities to learn because it involves making decisions for themselves and being able to ask for the things that they need when they need it. You're not always going to be on the job site with them at their workplace. And if there is something basic that they need that their employer should be able to provide, they need to know how to ask for that. So skills in this area include knowing their rights related to employment for someone with a disability, knowing how to ask for assistance appropriately, Recognizing harassment situations and knowing how to report them. And sometimes that requires another party. If this person comes home or comes to you and says something that happened in the office and they're uncomfortable, but they don't recognize it as harassment, that may be a way that you can support them in helping them learn how to report that it isn't appropriate. Another skill area, making informed decisions. We all make decisions every day, right? In all aspects of life. Taking action when needed, expressing needs and wants to others, and then understanding appropriate social cues and behaviors in the workplace. And of course, that's a big one for a lot of adults without a disability, but especially for our kids who have an intellectual disability or autism. Some of those things kind of come with that as a symptom, is just not being able to read social cues. And again, these are critical skills needed to be able to work independently. There are many other self-determination and self-advocacy skills that are related to living and learning independently, but this presentation is focusing on work or employment. And also, let me say here that a person does not need to have mastered all of these skill areas in order to get a job. Okay, I put these out there as things to work on. Like I said, with some of these on this page, all of us need to work on some of these skills. We haven't mastered all of them either. So it's just always something to work on, something to keep in mind, and you'll be able to target the skill areas that your child is more deficit in, that you need to bring them a little bit more up to speed. But the less support that they require in these areas, the more independent they will become as it relates to working. The next area is safety skills, and these are skills that are needed for keeping oneself as well as others safe in a work environment. The skills on this list include knowing how and when to call 911, very important skill to have. Knowing how to safely operate equipment on the job site, knowing and following safety procedures at the workplace, following directions on the job, knowing who to contact if an injury occurs, and using personal protective equipment when directed. Of course, all jobs are not going to have that much equipment and, safety issues. Some jobs, like you see the young man in the picture has a hard hat on, that this is something that safety would be probably be a bigger concern to him, but someone who's working in an office may not have as many safety issues. But keep in mind that there are many needed safety skills, and different jobs will have different safety protocols. The ones on this checklist are designed to focus generally on those needed in a work environment. Now, the next area is financial management skills. These are skills needed to manage money, manage your paycheck, understand taxes, and other financial things that are related to working. So the skills on this checklist are knowing what payroll deductions are, knowing that if you make $10 an hour and you work 10 hours this week, you're not going to bring home $100, knowing that there are deductions for various things, knowing what taxes are taken out of paychecks and why, completing financial forms for employment. And some of these things are things that, well, I need help with that one because I never can remember what to put on my W-4, but, to make sure that appropriate taxes are taken out of my check. But, we all need support on some of these, and some of these are not things that they have to decide on the job. They can have help filling these things out. Also, opening a checking or savings account. So many employers now use direct deposit. It's very important. Earlier, like when your child gets to high school, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and maybe open a joint checking or saving account. Let them start using a debit card or write, we really don't write checks much anymore, but let them start using a debit card and understand that that's coming directly out of the money they've put there. Making those things make sense. Tracking banking transactions and balances. And of course, now you can get the banking app on your phone, and it's going to let you know when you get under a certain amount, and you can set that up to avoid overdraft. That's again another thing that you can use with technology. And then understanding just simply how people get paid. When does that happen? Marking that on your calendar when your paycheck's going to land in your account. Those kinds of things. And again, there are many more financial management skills that are helpful, but the ones on this checklist relate specifically to employment, and most people need to be aware of. And again, I think I speak for pretty much all of us when I say we all need support in some of these areas at some point in time. If you haven't mastered all of these, it does not mean you cannot get a job or should not get a job. So now let's look at job seeking. This area focuses on those skills needed to seek and gain employment. So the skills covered on this checklist include identifying places to look for job postings, preparing a resume, completing a job application, writing a cover letter, developing job interview skills, dressing appropriately for job interviews, and then following appropriate hygiene for interviews. That's a basic thing that sometimes we leave that out because we assume that that is done, but that's something to make sure you keep a check on. Some of the skills will also be appropriate for those seeking volunteer or unpaid positions as well, like preparing a resume, completing a job interview, and following appropriate hygiene. Some of these volunteer or unpaid positions, you can use these skills. And we're not promoting, for our kids to just do volunteer work, but sometimes volunteer work can really help build up a resume and help teach some of these skills that you almost need experience to learn. And it's easier to get a volunteer position, than it is a paid position most of the time. It's easier to volunteer somewhere and build these skills so that you're preparing for work. It's not an instead of work, it's a before we get to that stage. We have a whole webinar called Getting and Keeping Your First Job. And so check out our calendar of events. It's not on the calendar for right now, but probably in the spring we'll hit that one kind of hard because a lot of folks are looking to get summer jobs. So we like to do this one in the spring so that they can start getting prepared to get a job for the summer. This next skill area discusses skills needed for keeping or maintaining a job, and those skills include understanding job expectations for things like attendance and punctuality, which, most supervisors are looking pretty hard at that, especially when you first start, to see how, if you're going to be on time, if you're going to have a problem getting to work, especially if you're using public transportation or that kind of thing, is it going to be manageable for you to get to work and be there on time? Working without supervision. Most jobs, you're not supervised all the time. And so is this person able to work without supervision, without close supervision? Understanding how to request time off for sick and vacation time. Demonstrating a positive work attitude, very important. Completing necessary job forms like timesheets or time off request forms or, those kinds of things that may be required for a job. Understanding how to keep track of the time that you've worked. It's always a good idea to know how to track your time. Like if you have to punch a clock, for example, when you get to work, writing down, keeping a little journal of when you clock in and out so that you make sure that your pay lines up with your actual time worked. Wearing appropriate and clean clothing. Maintaining acceptable personal hygiene, which is different for different jobs. If you're going to be on a construction site, nobody really cares if you showered that morning, but if you're working elbow to elbow with people in an office, that's probably a good thing to do. Keep up with the hygiene. Having reliable transportation to and from the job. And again, driving or being driven or using public transportation, whatever is going to get you to the job, that you need to be prepared for that. And then using a visual schedule or visual directions to accomplish job tasks. And sometimes that may be an accommodation that an employer can set up, but the individual who is seeking the job and doing the work may need to request that. That's just a very simple, free thing that an employer can do in order to make someone successful on a job and be able to stay on task. The next area is communication. The varied types of people that youth and young adults with disabilities will need to communicate with on a job are people like their employer, their coworkers, customers, or the public that they interact with, and clients, customers and clients. Skills covered in this area include being able to ask for feedback, using appropriate language on the job site, being aware of and managing their own body language appropriately, managing voice control appropriately. And we know that's a problem for some of our kids. My son's a non-speaker, but he understands when I tell him this is an inside voice place. We use our inside voice here. You are too loud, because he gets excited and he doesn't talk, but he makes sounds. So learning to manage that voice voice volume is the word I was looking for. Engaging in conversation with others. That's not necessarily something that you have to do to be able to work. But almost always there's going to be a time for interaction. And so being able to engage at least minimally in some form of communication to converse with others, being polite, and then also accepting feedback from supervisors or coworkers. Those are good communication skills to have. The next area addresses interpersonal skills that are needed to successfully interact with others on the job site. And while communication kind of, these overlap a little bit, but skill areas include demonstrating friendliness, adaptability, and politeness in group settings. Groups are different than one-on-one. How you interact in a group is very different from how you interact one-on-one. So kind of understanding the difference. Demonstrating speaking, listening, and social skills as a member of a work team. Interacting appropriately with those in authority. Interacting professionally with coworkers, knowing what kind of language is appropriate and not appropriate on your job site, and what kinds of things it's appropriate. Your coworker is not necessarily your BFF, and that's kind of a difficult distinction to make when you go to a job several times a week and you're interacting with that person. Sometimes it can become too familiar, and understanding that just because that person is familiar now doesn't mean that they're a buddy. So you may need to interact differently than you do with your friends. Responding appropriately to requests from those in authority, requests from coworkers, and even requests from customers. And then understanding work ethics, just understanding, be present when you're on the job, work while you're on the clock, do what you're asked to do while you're on the clock. Don't spend time on your phone or, wasting time. Even chit-chatting with people is a time waster. So just understanding, having a work ethic. Now, the final area that we'll cover is personal skills. And this area involves some skills that are like the skills we've talked about in other areas. These are ones that influence how a person acts and how they complete tasks. Some of these skill areas include working well as a part of a team, demonstrating some leadership skills. Everybody does, not everybody is a leader, but some people are. And if you have that gene, then learning how to use those leadership skills, demonstrating a strong work ethic, demonstrating problem-solving skills. When you come up with something, and even if you have to ask a colleague, but being able to know when there's a problem that needs to be solved, and demonstrating some skill in solving that problem. Demonstrating empathy for others. Paying attention to details. This is something I fuss at my husband about because there are some things that he just does not attend to detail. And that makes him kind of a poor administrator for some things. And at home, I'm the detailed person. And so, that's kind of how we complement each other. As some people have an automatic attention to detail and some don't. But on the job, everybody needs to pay a little bit more attention to detail. And then keeping a tidy and organized work area. We all know what a messy desk is. It's a sign of genius. And as you can, if I turned the computer a little bit, you would see a sign of genius right here in front of me. But not everybody's going to be a neatnik at work, but making sure that your workspace, if you have your own workspace, that it's kept at in an acceptable way. And that doesn't mean, that you have to be like freakishly neat or anything like that. None of us, I don't think, are. So working independently, here we come, is a checklist that's designed to provide a listing of skills under the 9 broad categories that research has indicated that youth and young adults need to develop in order to participate fully in competitive integrated employment, which is our dream for all of our folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So these categories should sound familiar because they're the ones that we just went through. The organization and time management, self-determination and self-advocacy, safety, financial management, job seeking, communication, interpersonal and personal skills. So this resource is linked here on this slide that you will have when I email it to you. And it'll be a live link after you download the slide deck. If you're looking at a recording of this live training, please email me if you want the slide deck, and I'll be happy to send that to you. sblackman@fhfofgno.org, and I'll be happy to send that to you if you're seeing this as a recording. The Working Independently, Here We Come checklist can be used in several different ways. One way that you can use it is as an informal kind of a transition assessment. And by checking off skills that the youth has already mastered on the checklist, then you can identify the areas of weakness that need further development. So first, you would use this checklist to identify the skill areas that that your child or your young adult knows how to do. Check those off. They're already doing this. I know they can do this. Check that off. If you're not sure, then ask them to tell you about that skill or to demonstrate that skill to you. Don't just assume that they know it. Youth and families, another way to use it. Youth and families can use the checklist once it's completed to identify the skills that the person needs to develop to be prepared to enter the work world. Parent centers like ours, educators, and other professionals can use the checklist to facilitate discussions about job readiness and key skills. These are things that we need to be talking to our kids about well before they get to the age or the time that they're ready to work or they're the age they can work. This checklist can be used to contribute to the development of IEP transition goals, like I mentioned at the beginning. Some of these areas will be perfect for IEP transition goals, and they would be great to bring to your transition team or to your transition IEP, to your IEP meeting where transition is going to be discussed. And then the checklist can be used to identify areas of needed support and to make connections to services that can support that development. No man is an island, as they say, and all of us, as I've said several times, all of us need supports in different areas of our lives. Identifying the supports that are needed and then identifying who can provide that support for your young person on the job will be very helpful. So I think this has been a pretty good overview of the bigger skill areas that are needed for employment, as well as some of the specific tasks that fall into each of these categories. Do keep in mind that not all skills identified on the checklist will be mastered by every person with a disability, and that may be due to the unique challenges of each disability. But chances are, as we read through the different tasks and skill areas, you were kind of keeping an unofficial tally in your mind of those that your loved one or your student needs to develop, right? That's the purpose of listing the skill groups and then breaking down the big skills into the various specific tasks. It makes them more easily identifiable and more manageable to address. It's almost like having goals and then benchmarks or, that kind of thing. So we don't want to just say improve organizational management and time management skills. We want to use some of those smaller tasks and work on those specific areas. And please be aware that there is not any particular emphasis on how this checklist is organized. The areas and skills under each area are not in any particular priority order. They're all going to be learned at different paces and at different times according to the person's individual needs and life experiences. So there is no rhyme or reason to how this is organized as far as the order of things. Your child may be really good at organization and time management. That may be really their thing. They have to be certain places at certain times, so that's not going to be something that you have to deal with. Whereas somebody else, they have to work with the fact that their young adult has no concept of time or time management. So, it's just different for every person. I hope that this information has been helpful to you. Next week, when we do part 4, it's like, I don't know, 40 or 50 slides because we have so many different resources that we packed into each of these skill areas. So we're going to be going through those. I do kind of fly through them because it's just a lot of information. But again, you'll get it when you when I email it to you, you'll get the slide deck. I'm about to drop our little, let me do this before there we go. That I just dropped in the chat box the link to the brief survey for feedback. That's in the chat box now. I kind of glassed over that last slide, but if you need to get in contact with us, there's so many ways. We're online everywhere you can imagine. So please, if you need to get in touch with us, check out our website. My contact information will be on here. If you need to contact me and you ask me questions that I can't answer, I will certainly immediately turn you over to someone else in our office who can help you with that. And I also have one of my colleagues, Nicole DeRoche, is on the webinar today, and she has a lot of experience in job coaching and working with individuals with disabilities and helping them to get a job and to keep jobs. Her own son has a lot of experience with working through programs in the area and getting gainful employment. And so if you have any questions, I'm going to put Nicole on the spot and let her answer them. I'm just kidding, Nicole. If you have any questions, though, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll open your mic so you can talk, or drop your questions in the chat box. Thank you, Nicole. At what age can they go for a part-time job? I think 16. I mean, some places will hire kind of a little bit younger kids, but usually it's 16 when you can get a job. So yeah, and you can volunteer earlier than that. One of the nice things about volunteer experiences is that those can be done as a family affair. If you want to go to the local soup kitchen or you want to volunteer at the SPCA or the local animal shelter, or you want to volunteer at the food bank, those are things that can really be beneficial for kids with disabilities to do and to learn how to interact with the public. And then you can be there for support to get them through that, and it starts building that resume, that kind of thing. So those can be done earlier than 16, but I think Nicole can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think probably 16 is about the minimum age. Who else has a question? That's what I thought, and that's why I signed up for the webinar. And we volunteer at the Second Harvest from time to time too. I think it was you maybe that mentioned that the other day, Tanya, and it stuck in my mind. The Second Harvest is a great opportunity. Yeah, it's a great, especially this time of year, so much is going on with those, but not just at the holidays. It's important to do, to work for those great organizations year round. So it can become, something your family enjoys doing together. It's a great idea. Any other questions for us today? I do appreciate your attendance today. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. My son does not work. He has a lot of medical issues and pretty significant disabilities, and it's just never been something that we were able to do with him. It's not for everybody, but certainly is for a lot more people. A lot more people could work than are working. And so work is so important. It could be so important to so many of our individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I hope that if you haven't really been thinking along those lines with your child, that you will start thinking along those lines. It does give them a sense of being needed. It gives them a sense of accomplishment, of being needed. Of course, volunteer, you're not going to be getting a paycheck, but for those who were getting that paycheck, even if it's small, they're only working a few hours a week. Getting that paycheck can be so important. Getting a pat on the back or a thank you from somebody who works at the Second Harvesters, for example, that can go a long way. That can really give incentive uh, and give them kind of a new spark, with working in the community. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you being here, appreciate your time, and we hope to see you on Thursday, a week from today, for um, our last installment of this 4-part series. So take care and have a great week.